What's going on? It's Kevin with Optimize Essentials, and today I want to share with you the ultimate guide to anterior pelvic tilt. I say this because I've researched a lot about anterior pelvic tilt. I've personally experienced it myself. It's kind of also the reason why I got into posture and therapy, or it's kind of the very first symptoms or characteristics of posture that I realized that I had myself, that kind of was at the start of the whole posture journey for me. So this is very close, not just to my heart, but to my body, to my pelvis. And today I'm going to share with you the ultimate guide to kind of understanding what it is and also what you can do about it. I believe that in today's society, or in our society, it's really prevalent that people have anterior pelvic tilt, but not everyone understands all of the reasons and the underlying factors, causations behind anterior pelvic tilt. And today I'm going to share it with you in the ultimate guide, and also what you can do about it and how you can kind of maximize what you have based on what you were born with, etc. and whatnot. So let's get started, guys. Super excited. So what is it? All right, what is anterior pelvic tilt? Anterior basically means forward, front. So as you can see, it's the forward tilt of the pelvis, all right? So I'm going to show you what this is. If you can't see my dinosaur drawing, what that means is that the forward tilting of the pelvis, all right? So generally, you want to have a nice, pretty neutral pelvis, but what happens when things become overactive and underactive is that pelvis tilts forward anteriorly, and then your belly sticks out, so big belly, and then your butt sticks out as well. So if you can see here, there's a excessive arch in the lower back, compression in the lower back, and also weakness in the front, which causes that tilting forward of the pelvis. Now, in some people, you can see this a lot. In some people, it's not as noticeable, it's not as obvious. However, anterior pelvic tilt, when it gets excessive, is called a hyperlordosis, all right? And this opposite, posterior pelvic tilt, is also just not as common, but it's just as commonly seen, or it's potentially, I wouldn't say it's as common, but you could definitely see this every now and then. The posterior pelvic tilt and the anterior pelvic tilt. So both are extremes of each other. The anterior pelvic tilt is more common. Naturally, you want to be in a somewhat neutral with a slight bit of lordosis, all right? So enough showing you my pelvis and what it is. I want to explain to you why it occurs, all right? So for me, this took a while for me to really understand and grasp, because contrary to what conventional wisdom says, anterior pelvic tilt is not necessarily caused by excessive sitting. Now, I know some of you guys will be freaking out. It does have correlations, and it does have its own ties to it. There was an article that I ran to online, forgot what exactly the website was, but I'll link it definitely. And he talks about how excessive sitting, people sit in posterior pelvic tilt, so the opposite, right? So the opposite is posterior pelvic tilt, when the butt tucks under. If you think about it, it's true. Analyze how you're sitting right now. There's a very good chance that you're slumped over in the back of your chair, or you're slumped over with your butt tucked under, with your lumbar spine flat, and you're sitting in a posterior pelvic tilt. Not many of us sit within our excessive arch in our lower back, which is classified as the anterior tilt of the pelvis. So it's not that it doesn't influence. I definitely think it does, but I want to make this clear. I want to clarify, because I had a theory in my mind that some of us are naturally more inclined or born with an anterior pelvic tilt, which is only exacerbated by our present conditions of excessive sitting and whatnot. So with that being said, contrary to why we have it, it's not exactly excessive sitting. Excessive sitting should shorten your hamstrings and cause a posterior pelvic tilt, but we actually see that it's the opposite. With the society, with most of society, with anterior pelvic tilt being more prevalent, Why is it that more people don't have posterior pelvic tilt because they're sitting in a posterior tilted position? Why is it that most people have an anterior pelvic tilt? Well, it's because I think, not just I think, now there's research showing that there's a genetic predisposition. What does this mean, right? Some of us are more genetically prone to be in anterior pelvic tilt because there are different pelvic structures. Because there are different pelvic structures, the way our pelvis was designed when we were born, or just that how it runs in our family ancestral tree, that causes our pelvis to be in a certain position that's more likely to become an excessive hyperlordosis. Now, there's different studies on PubMed, NHIS that kind of confirm this, that the majority of the population have a stronger inclination to lordosis, hyperlordosis. So it's not necessarily caused by excessive sitting, which it has definitely an influence. We're just more prone to it through excessive sitting, and it's not necessarily bad. It's only bad when it becomes dysfunctional. Because if you take a look at the Bushmen in native tribes, right? These people have lordosis, like anterior pelvic tilt, pretty to the max. And it's not necessarily bad because they're pretty functional. They have very athletic abilities. So the native tribes in Africa, they have a big degree of anterior pelvic tilt, but you don't see them complaining about having tight hip flexors or back pain. Well, we don't exactly know because we never really inquired about them, but through our observations and studies, they have pretty strong athletic ability. So it's not necessarily bad in the sense that anterior pelvic tilt is bad. It's only bad when it becomes dysfunctional. What does this mean, dysfunctional, right? Well, first we have to look at our dinosaur diagram. So if you were born with a predisposition of having anterior pelvic tilt, a natural inclination of the pelvis to be slightly tilted forward, it only becomes worse when we sit on it again and again and again and again. So the dominant muscles that supposedly give us the athletic advantage now becomes dysfunctional. Because, okay, let me first step back a little bit and clarify what happens in anterior pelvic tilt. So far, conventional wisdom and what we've learned is that the overactive and underactive muscles associated with having a pelvis that's tilted forward is excessively tight hip flexors, all right? Hip flexors aren't just your psoas, which is contrary to what most people believe. Our psoas, our TFL, our quads, all of these are associated with flexion of the hips, all right? So when we sit all day, even though we're sitting in posterior pelvic tilt, because our genetic predisposition, our genetic structure, our pelvis structure is more inclined to be in anterior pelvic tilt, through excessive sitting and the shortening position of our hip flexors, that only exacerbates our anterior pelvic tilt even more. And because of that, and it becomes dysfunctional, we don't exercise and we don't really put our body in the right biomechanical position, that's when it becomes dysfunctional. Because when this becomes excessively tight and we sit on our asses all day, now our glutes become weak, our abs become weak, and that's how you see the pelvis tilting forward and the butt and the gut and the butt spilling forward, all right? So I'm going to show you one more time what this looks like, and I'm going to articulate and kind of illustrate it a little bit better for you, all right? So imagine this, all right? Neutral pelvis with a slight degree of anterior pelvic tilt. So I personally have it myself, so when I relax and I let go of all this, you'll see what I'm talking about, all right? So right now, this feels natural for me because I've been working at it for a really long time. Before, when I used to play a lot of video games, what happens was, because my ass and my core isn't working, what happens is my belly sticks out, and then my butt is weak, so then now this whole tilting forward, you can see, because my hip flexors have become overactive and tight from not really opening them up and stretching them, and then my abs and my butt have become really weak, so now they are not doing its job to realign the pelvis or neutralize the pelvis. So now you can see that my belly is just pushed out right here, and my butt is just sticking out. All right, so now watch what happens when I tighten my abs, all right? Most notably, your transverse abdominis. This is the lower portion of your abs. Watch what happens, all right? So I'm just going to draw my belly in a little bit. And as you can see, my pelvis tilted forward just a little bit, all right? But you can't just stop at working your abs. You want to make sure you combine the lower ab training with the butt squeeze, all right? So, whoop. That's what happens when I contract my butt. So if I release my butt and then I release my belly, now you can see excessive tilt. So contract at the belly and then contract at the butt. So now we have these two factors that are key players in stabilizing your pelvis that helps tilt the pelvis back in a neutral position. So now let's go over into more terminology, the overactive and underactive muscles, all right? So now I just explained to you the two key muscles. So these are the two weak muscles that have become excessively dysfunctional. So it's only an issue when it becomes dysfunctional when these muscles, the overactive and underactive muscles, are excessively overactive and excessively underactive, because we're more prone to having an anterior pelvic tilt. When we sit on it, we only exacerbate the condition, and those muscles no longer give us that athletic advantage. I personally believe that anterior pelvic tilt gives you an athletic advantage. Try running and stuff with a posterior pelvic tilt. Not good. You're gonna have all kinds of knee pain, hip pain, back pain, because that's just not how the body's better when you have a slight degree of anterior pelvic tilt. So with that being said, this becomes weak because we're sitting and we're not really engaging our core, and then our butt shuts off basically from sitting on it the whole day. And then when in that position, now that causes us to tilt forward, and then now these muscles in the front of our hips, our quads right here in the front of our body, our quads, our hip flexors, our TFL, and then our not vastus lateralis, that definitely plays a part into it, but our psoas, our iliacus, all these muscles tighten up in the front and actually rotate your femurs forward, so you kind of have your butt sticking out. So anterior pelvic tilt is also classified by the internal rotation of your femurs. It can also be externally rotated. It's not as common, but it's definitely possible. So it's classified as an internal rotation of the femurs, and then your butt sticks out. And because of that, all these muscles in the front of your hips need to be opened up and relaxed and released before you can strengthen the opposite muscles. And then because as your pelvis tilts forward, that creates an excessive arch in your lumbar spine, all right? And then that is where most back pain comes from, because our psoas major, our psoas actually connects from the front of our hips, wraps around our lower back, our spine. So when that muscle gets really tight and it pulls down onto our spine, so imagine there's our spine right here, right? The spine's right here and there's vertebrae. If it connects to our spine and it's being tight and it's being pulled, now you can imagine this line right here, the psoas, pulling down, creating an arch in our back, but at the same time, it's compressing the vertebrae in our lower back, and that's where it creates that lower back pain. And then now can you see why, if you're doing heavy back squats or heavy deadlifts, that's going to create even more compression on the lower back. So you want to make sure you address this issue at the pelvis before you do anything else. Why? Because your body isn't in the best position due to the overactive and underactive muscles, but people aren't aware of this. They just keep training on top of this and they expect it to get better. And then even when people do understand and they're aware that they have anterior pelvic tilt, they may not necessarily address it correctly. Why? Because if you just go ahead and strengthen your abs through doing regular crunches or strengthen your butt doing your normal hip bridges, it's not enough. You have to understand that there's many key muscles that you have to address first. In terms of overactivity, you have to tone them down a little bit because they've become hypertonic. Hypertonic just basically means they're overly facilitated and overly active so much that you have to shut them down first to prevent reciprocal inhibition, so that you can start activating your butt, you can start activating your core properly, in the sense that they're restored in their normal function, that you can begin to neutralize that pelvis. And you have to re-educate your body over and over and over again until you can get that pattern ingrained. Because if you've been sitting on your ass for many years and you have a dysfunctional body, your body has developed the motor pathways, the motor neurons, the neuromuscular connections to that position, and until you properly understand how to train and teach your body how to be in the best biomechanical position, you're going to stay stuck there, especially if you've been loading it excessively through weights. Now your body has been really conditioned to stay in that position because it's learned that, you know, we're strong in this position, but we're not actually strong in this position. We just think we're strong, but we've just made a shit ton of adaptations to that position that leads to the false belief that your body is supposed to. But anyways, that's a long story to get into. But that's basically it. So without further said, I actually want to add one more thing. So when your hip flexors become tight, right? Your psoas, your TFL, your lumbar erectors, and your rectus femoris, your quads, when all these get tight and tilt forward, what basically happens isn't just an anterior pelvic tilt. You might have rounding forward of their upper back, all right? So when your butt tilts forward, your body has to compensate by throwing your shoulders forward and by also pushing your head forward. So you'll see a lot of people who have their butt sticking out, their shoulders rounding forward, and their head coming forward at the same time. So they look like the silverback gorillas, you know, these guys who are really strong at the gym, but they just have really poor posture from doing the whole thing strong, which I just said. But it's because their body is in such poor position, they aren't aware of that. They don't realize it. So it's not exactly bad having an anterior pelvic tilt. It only becomes bad when it becomes excessive, all right? Okay, with all that being said, what can we do about this? I'm going to teach you from A to Z all of these steps that you need to do. I may not exactly share all of the exercises, but I want to explain to you the fundamentals, the principles behind what you can do. So the very first thing is you want to release the overactive muscles, and then you want to stretch them, the overactive muscles, and then you want to strengthen and activate the underactive muscles. Does it make sense? Why do we want to release and stretch before we do the strengthening? Because if these muscles are overactive and facilitated, there's a concept called reciprocal inhibition. So basically, if you have excessively tight hip flexors, they will shut down and prevent you from actually fully engaging and activating your core and your abs, because they're super tight and overactive. You want to make sure you tone them down and you shut off the connection, the narrow pathways, neuromuscular connections to those areas before you can fully engage your glutes and your core. It's definitely still possible, but it's much more optimal when you attack the overactive first by releasing and stretching it. And you want to release before you stretch, because if you don't release muscles that are shortened and overactive, there's a lot of trigger points that you want to make sure you massage out first before you can fully pull the muscle apart. Think of it as warming up and priming your body so that it can be stretched out properly. So release, stretch, and strengthen before you go in and exercise, because that way you can maximize your body's position before you hammer it again with more exercises to exacerbate your dysfunction. All right, and that's all, guys. So I'm going to teach you what muscles to release, how to stretch, and then how you can do some strengthening exercises to really improve your anterior pelvic tilt, or restoring it back to its natural optimal anterior pelvic tilt positions. Because quick story, I was looking at photos of myself in the past, and I've noticed, like, I had anterior pelvic tilt when I was really young. Some kids have anterior pelvic tilt when they're really young. You could argue that it's caused by excessive sitting, but they're just more genetically prone to being in that position, and it only just gets worse through excessive sitting. So let's get started. I'm going to share with you guys how to release and stretch it, and how you can put yourself back on the right track. And if you haven't seen my other videos on back pain, having anterior pelvic tilt, you want to make sure you check that out. But anyways, let's get right into it. Peace. Guys, so now I'm going to show you how to release and stretch all of the overactive muscles when it comes down to anterior pelvic tilt. I like to do things a little bit more unconventionally, so the first thing that we're going to release is actually your TFL. So if you don't know, your TFL is a small little muscle in front of your hips, or slightly below the front of your hips. So here's your hip bone. You want to go about one fist size down, and it's this tiny, almost rectangular, triangular muscle that we want to be attacking. All right. So oh, I forgot to mention all the equipment you need. So I recommend getting a foam roller that might have some dots, some pinpointed pressure on it, and then also a lacrosse ball. You can use a golf ball, which is super painful, or you can use a tennis ball. Basically anything that's dense and roughly small so that you can really get into those muscles. This is going to hurt a lot more, so I'm going to show you how to activate it first with a foam roller, and then eventually progress here. And then, so foam roller, lacrosse ball, tennis ball, baseball. Baseballs will work okay, not as good, but anything that's round and circular. And then finally a surface to do your stretches on. I'm using a chair. You can find anything that's about up to your hips when you're on the ground. And these are the three equipments that you'll need. And then let's get started. So the very first thing you wanna do for the foam roller is you wanna be able to find and isolate your TFL, because if you jump right into the lacrosse ball when you haven't figured out what your TFL feels like, then you're gonna have a really hard time trying to act or myofascial release or SMR your TFL. So what I like to do is I like to figure out what my TFL feels like on a foam roller. So you want to do this first by getting onto your sides, and then you want to be locating that area that I just told you about. So the hip bone, my hip bone is right here, and then one fist size down. I'm going to place it right in front of my hip and slightly lower. So right about here, I can feel this tender spot on my TFL. You'll know when you hit it, when you feel this tender spot. So to feel it even more, you want to drop all the way down onto it so that your body is like literally stacked on top. And then I take my right leg, or whichever leg you're doing it on, and then you're going to cross it over here. And then now I'm going to rotate my pelvis on top of it and really find the spots that really speak out and trigger. And then, okay, I found a pretty sore spot, but it's pretty generalized because this is a really big foam roller. So to start off, you want to find the tender spots with a big foam roller, so it gives you a better idea of what that muscle feels like. So now I'm going to stay on this for about 10-15 seconds. If you're starting off, you've never done SMR, self-myofascial release, this is a great way to start. But once you get good at it, you want to transition to the ball, all right? So I'm going to stay on this for a little bit more. Ideally, you want to stay on this for about, I would say, a minute on each side. And then once you get really good at it, then transition to the ball. So find the spot. I found mine. So now what I want you to do is switch out the foam roller and remember that pain spot, that location where you felt that tender spot, and then take the ball in place of the foam roller and place it in that same exact location. So feel out the spot for beginners with the foam roller, and then get onto it with the pinpointed location with the lacrosse ball. And you want to do the same exact thing. And then this, gets much deeper into your muscle tissue, and helps massage out those adhesions a lot better. So now I'm on that same exact location that I found through my foam roller, and I'm just gonna press into it and really just try to relax and breathe deeply through my nose, holding into my belly, and just trying to relax into it. So that way it can really get into that muscle and press into it. If you didn't know, your TFL connects all the way down to your IT band. So if you have a really tight IT band or really tight TFL, that can pull on your kneecap, right? Because your IT band actually connects into your kneecap. And if you haven't seen my videos on the ultimate guide to knee pain, or just how to address it, how to release your TFL, you're gonna make sure you check that out. This goes into detail why some people experience knee pain. So you want to stay on this for about 60 seconds to up to even 2 minutes, depending on how tender it is. And you don't want to move too much. You just want to press it in there and then roll maybe a few centimeters each time once the pain is gone. So that will help you release your TFL. So now the second thing you want to do, so you want to do both sides for about 1 minute to 2 minutes. And then now the second muscle you want to release are your quads, all right? So generally, when you have anterior pelvic tilt, the TFL is tight, the quad is tight. So what you want to do to release the quad is similar to releasing the TFL. However, you don't want to use the little crossbar. I wouldn't recommend it even if you're advanced. Unless you really know what you're doing, I would just stick with the foam roller. So for the foam roller, for your quads, you want to start way high up. The trigger points are a little bit different for everybody, but generally you will feel the most pain towards the lower end of your quad. Higher up, you might feel some because this is where that connective tissue is in terms of your hip flexors. But generally, you'll feel most of it towards the lower end of your belly, the quad belly. All right. So I like to start all the way on the top and then find my way down. So point your toe, really relax onto it by just laying like a seal, you know, on the ground. And then, so the goal is you do not want to tense up. Do not tense up your muscles. Otherwise, so if you tense up, your foot will pop up like this. If you tense up, then your weight, the body weight can't exactly massage into the muscles. When you're tense and tight, those muscles aren't relaxed and you can't get a good SMR. So you want to make sure you relax by just wiggling your butt or wiggling your body. Once you're relaxed, now from there, you want to slowly crawl up. Now here's where everyone gets it wrong, all right? I see a lot of people doing this at the gym. This is not how you do myofascial release, all right? To really get into those deep tissues, you want to relax and then move up like 1 inch at a time, like really, really, really slow. And then once you find something painful, I don't feel anything yet, but let's say I found something painful, something painful here, then you want to hold on to that and just really breathe into it and then let the pain subside and then slowly work your way down, like a lot slower than what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get this to you so that this video doesn't become an hour long, because I can literally spend up to an hour doing SMR throughout my whole body and it feels amazing. So basically, you go all the way down to your quad. So generally most of the pain is here, so I'm relaxed into it. You don't want the leg to be shot up. You just want to relax into it and just really massage around in that area once you find it, and then move all the way down to your kneecap. If you want to make it a little bit more advanced, you can start bending your knee and flossing the quad through that motion. But I find that if you don't know what you're doing and you haven't done this before, flossing it through the motion, you'll tense up your quad and you won't really get a good release. So you just want to relax into it until you get good at it and you know what releasing your quads feel like. Then you can slowly transition into movement, all right? So just a little recap, you want to start at the very top of your hip, and then you want to roll all the way down slowly, stopping at each trigger point that you feel and massaging into it. And then after you've released your TFL and your quads, I like to go into my IT band. A lot of people say rolling your IT band doesn't do anything. In my opinion, once you've released your TFL and you release your quads, now there's not as many adhesions and sticky points, so that I find that rolling out my IT band helps a little bit in terms of having more fluidity in my knee movement and just general leg exercises. So to roll out your IT band and also your vastus lateralis, so you want to make sure you attack the side of your quads too, not just your IT band, because when we rolled out your rectus femoris, that's the front of your quads. You want to do your vastus lateralis, which is the side of your quads. And if all these are being overactive because you have an anterior pelvic tilt or you have internally rotated femurs because your groin is tight because you're tilted forward, then you want to make sure you roll out these muscles too, because they've been really overactive and they pretty much hijacked your neural system to really help you stabilize your body. So what happens now, you want to start where your glute medius and your TFL is, so right between the TFL and the back of your butt, right on that area, that's where you slowly roll yourself up. And to not tense up and feel really tight, you want to make sure you take this opposite leg, you stack it right in the front, you take both hands to support you, because it can get really tiring if you don't have the upper body strength or if you don't have the stamina to hold yourself up. This gives you the best optimal position to keep your body from getting tired before you can even release your quads. So hold yourself up and then relax this leg, right? To relax that leg, all you have to do is just wiggle it a little bit and just let it relax. And then from there, you use the leg, the arms to really slide yourself up. And I'm already feeling some deep pain here, but I'm just gonna go through it pretty quick so you can have a better idea of how to do it. So generally I take my time. I go from here, oh, pain, I stay on there for 30 seconds, move on to the next section, pain, stay there for 30 seconds, pain, 30 seconds, bam, 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 all the way down to my kneecap. And if I find something really hard, I just like massage into it, bounce back and forth in that position until everything feels nice and loose. Generally, my left side is a lot more tight than my right, so I don't spend as much time on right. If you don't feel any tightness or things don't really hurt, then switch over to the other side or adjust the technique and watch this video over again so you understand where those muscles are, or even look up the muscles so that you have a better understanding of what muscles you should be targeting. Because at first, if you don't know what you're doing, it just feels like you're just hurting all over the place. And if you don't feel the muscles, the tenderness that's associated with releasing, then you're probably doing it wrong. So make sure you spend some time releasing. It takes a while, but once you get it down, then it's pretty awesome. All right, so that's all for the releases. You want to release your TFL. After you release your TFL, you're going to release your rectus femoris, which is the front of your quads, and then you want to roll out your IT band and also your vastus lateralis. So you want to roll out the vastus lateralis and the IT band. And then for stretches, the very first stretch that I like to pop into, this is where the chair comes in, is the hip flexor stretch and also a quad stretch at the same time. So a great way to hit both of them, I like to first start off with the hip flexor stretch because I can do it low. So for the hip flexor stretch, for a lot of people, this is really going to be really painful, right? So if this hurts a lot for you, then just stay here. Normally, once you stretch it for enough, you'll be able to pop straight up. But if you can't get that high, just stay right there. Make sure you squeeze your butt, all right? Squeeze your butt and push your hips in. You want to be able to pull open, pretty much like rip open that hip if you have really tight hips. So squeeze the butt and really push the hips into the ground. And from there, you'll feel this really intense release on your hips if you have really tight hips. And then slowly hold and breathe into that. So you want to breathe in deep, hold it for a little bit, really keep that pressure pressing into it the whole time. You don't want to bounce or anything. You don't want to back off of it and come off. Only back off unless you really need to. Generally, you want to just have a constant supply of pull. So imagine pulling a rubber band. You want to constantly keep that rubber band pulled and then slowly, progressively pull it more and more and more and more. Not pull. Does it make sense? Cool. So hold that there for about 1 minute to 2 minutes on each side. That's stretching out your psoas, your iliacus, your hip flexors. And then from there, you want to stretch out your quads now, right? To stretch out your quads, you want to pop straight up, and then you want to tilt your pelvis under, right? So when you have an anterior pelvic tilt, what happens is your butt sticks out, right? The rectus femoris, the quad, is tight. So you want to make sure you stretch it out by doing the opposite. You want to posteriorly tilt your pelvis. So tuck your butt under, squeeze your butt. Now for a lot of people, this is going to hurt like a motherfucker, right? Like this is going to be really painful if you haven't done it before, especially if you have tight quads, especially if you have tight hip flexors. Generally, I find that the quads are the ones that's going to be the most painful because if you haven't stretched your quads out before, most people only know how to stretch their hip flexors, but the quads is where the important part is. I didn't really fix my anterior pelvic tilt until I learned that there's the quads that are involved. So to fix your quads, just pop them up and then just tilt under and try to reach your butt to the end, to your heel now. But remember, keep your butt flexed the whole time. And you want to scoot all the way back and you'll feel this deep pull towards the very front of your quads, right below your hip flexors. And you want to hold that for a little bit. And if you can get really advanced with this stretch, this is when you'll start feeling it up in the hip flexor region. You can even reach over to the opposite side and you'll feel a deep stretch down the whole lateral side of your body. And this is how you stretch out your quads and your hip flexors. And now, let me teach you how to stretch out your TFL for the final stretch, release and stretch. So far we covered all the releases and the stretches, but now we're gonna do the TFL stretch, the final one, right? So, woo! All right, so for the TFL stretch, what I want you to do, whichever side that you're trying to stretch is further away from the wall, all right? So I take my hand, my elbow, and I flatten it against the wall. And then now I take the side that you want to stretch is further away. So you want to take, let's say I'm trying to stretch my left side. I'm going to take my right leg, I'm going to cross it over to the midline of my body, and then I'm going to take my left leg that I'm trying to stretch, and I'm going to go away. So now I'm creating this arc in my body so that I can really isolate that TFL. So TFL right now is exposed, all right? You release the TFL, now you're in the position to stretch it. So in this position, my right foot is closer to the wall, my left foot is away from the wall. So you want to press your hips in, and then you want to twist it. Do you see that? So press it in, and then twist it away. So press in and twist at the same time, and then squeeze your butt. And that'll really help pull open that TFL and really get you a nice, good exposure to that muscle. And you want to hold that in for a solid 60 seconds, and then repeat, and then switch sides. So there you have it. Those are all the release and stretches. Just a quick recap. I released my TFL first, and then I released my quads by using the foam roller. And then if you get advanced, you can actively floss it, which I don't recommend yet. But try that out if you feel that you can do it. Just lay on it, roll down all the way, and then release your IT band or roll it out. You can't really release it. You just got to retension it. And then finally, to stretch, you want to stretch out your hip flexors on a stool or on a bench, anything that you find. So stretch out your hip flexors first by pressing your hips into the ground, stretching out your quads after that, and then finally jumping on the wall and stretching out your TFL. And these are all the muscles that you are going to stretch and release, all right? And then now, let me share with you how to strengthen and activate the underactive muscles, all right? So now I'm going to show you how to engage and activate all of the underactive muscles that have been sleeping, so to say, or have been inhibited due to reciprocal inhibition because you had really tight hip flexors and now they aren't able to activate because you haven't used them enough. So now we're going to be back on the ground. So the very first thing that I want to teach you how to activate is your transverse abdominis, your TVA. These are your deeper intrinsic core muscles that kind of get shut off because if you think about it, you're sitting down, your belly's pooched out, and you don't have no need to activate your core. So to engage and kind of implement those patterns, those neural pathways, the very first thing that you want to do to activate your TVA, which is deep muscle in your waist, kind of in your lower abdomen, is to do vacuums, tummy vacuums, all right? So how do you do a tummy vacuum? So you want to get on all fours and pull my shirt up so you can see. So to engage your TVA, what you want to do is get on all fours, and then each time you inhale, so it's an inhale and exhalation movement, all right? So each time you inhale, I want you to drop your belly button down. So you want to breathe into your belly, push the belly in, all right? So, and then on your exhale, you're going to exhale not as hard as you can, but you want to exhale completely. You want to exhale completely, and then you want to draw your belly button in to the top of your spine, all right? So, and then, and you're going to hold that for as long as you can until your next breath. So here's my next breath. Let the belly drop down again. And then squeeze as hard as you can. You should feel this very deep tightness, kind of soreness in the lower abdomen. That means you're actively engaging the TVA. Now, what you don't want to do is when you breathe in, I see a lot of clients do this, right? They breathe in, and then they tilt their butt upward. They do something weird with their waist. You don't want to do that. You want to keep the waist nice and neutral. You don't want to excessively arch your back. You want to just keep it nice and neutral, and then breathe in, push your belly out, and then draw in. So much that you almost feel your butt rotate in, but you don't let your butt completely rotate in. You just tighten up the pelvic floor, and then really draw your belly button in. It also helps to think of activating, like clenching your anus, so that you're really getting the deep pelvic floor too. So once you learn how to engage your TVA, now I'm going to teach you how to progress it a little bit more by engaging your TVA in a plank position. And then we'll tie in how to engage your butt at the same time so that can lead into the third exercise. So I'm going to show you 3 exercises. First one is tummy vacuum to draw in your lower abdomen. The second one is now a plank with your lower abdomen engaged and then also your butt squeezed, all right? So now you want to get in a plank position, draw your belly button in, keep your core tight, and then pinch your butt cheeks together, right? So posteriorly tilt and just keep that tight for 1 minute. So for the breathing, for the tummy vacuum, you want to do 10 of those, 10 breaths in and out, pull your belly out, and then exhale and squeeze your belly in for 10, and then now you want to hold this for 60 seconds. So my butt is completely squeezed. So not squeezed, relaxed, squeezed, not squeezed, squeezed, all right? So once you do that, you want to hold that for 60 seconds, and then finally, for the last exercise, I'm gonna show you, I already recorded the video, I'm gonna flip it to you on the screen. I'm gonna show you how to do pull-throughs, cable pull-throughs, all right? This is gonna be an amazing way to strengthen your glutes functionally instead of doing your typical hip bridges on the ground, all right? When you do the hip bridges, one, it's kind of hard to maintain a neutral pelvis, but also it's kind of hard to feel your butt if you have a really dysfunctional body. So pull-throughs is gonna be a great way to activate your butt, and that's gonna be all right? So I'm gonna put that video up right now, and you should integrate all three of these exercises, all right? So the tummy vacuum, the plank with the butt and core squeeze, and then now we're gonna go over how to do the cable pull-throughs. All right, guys, so this is the cable pull-throughs. So you wanna find a cable machine, and then you wanna grab onto a tricep rope. So a tricep rope looks like a tricep rope. It's two black ropes kind of with handles. And what you wanna do, you put it at the lowest setting. And then from that point, you want to keep your feet about shoulder width apart, all right? So shoulder width apart, and then you're going to lean into it and grab the rope, and then you want to pull it out in front of you, right below your groin. And then before you even start, you want to get into a neutral pelvis position. So in a second, you'll see that my pelvis is going to tuck under. I'm going to squeeze my butt, just like how I taught you guys in the plank. So you want to make sure you squeeze your butt and then engage your core first. So that's like the most optimal position you want to be in if you have anterior pelvic tilt. So you want to keep your butt squeezed and you want to keep your core tight, all right? So watch what happens, all right? Notice how I did a really quick tuck. If you didn't see that, I'm going to rewind it real fast. Okay, so bam, right there. And then I kind of shrugged my shoulder just so I can tuck my chin and align my whole body. This is a little bit more advanced, but you can try it out. But basically what happens is when I tuck my pelvis, everything above my body gets aligned as well. So this is how you kind of work optimally in terms of biomechanics and posture. So from here, you want to lean forward. You want to hinge at the hip. So you're bending forward as if you're folding. Imagine that the bottom of your legs and your upper body is like a doorway, all right? So when you hinge forward, that doorway is just closing down, all right? So this is what you do. You allow the rope to pull you underneath, and then you hinge forward. Try to maintain as a neutral back as you can, all right? So when you do this, notice how I didn't exactly bend my knees a lot. I kind of you imagine there is a force driving straight down your heels, and then at the top, you're just hinging forward, all right? So you want to hinge forward and then keep your back as neutral, as straight as possible by drawing your belly button in. So this is really important. As you're going down, you want to draw your belly button in to engage your TVA. And then from here, you're going to pull through your hips and squeeze your butt, all right? Be very careful of not extending your hips excessively. That kind of puts you more into an anterior pelvic shift. And we don't want that. You don't want extended hips. That looks pretty ugly. I have extended hips because I deadlift a lot and I push my hips forward, but now I'm more mindful of how to do this movement correctly. So pull forward, tuck the butt under, and really squeeze. So allow yourself to get pulled under, drive through your hips, and then come up and tuck your butt and squeeze. So really remember, squeeze your butt and squeeze your core. Those are the two important parts that we want to be engaging. And this is the cable pull through. You want to do this movement because you can also actively stretch and strengthen your hamstrings in a fixed position, which is pretty awesome. So this is, if you do this correctly, you don't need a lot of weight, but you can attack your hamstrings and most notably your glutes and your core, both after you learn to activate your TVA and also how to squeeze your butt during the plank. All right, so this is all of the exercises. So now let's conclude. All right, guys, so that wraps up our anterior pelvic guide video. I hope you enjoyed the ultimate guide to anterior pelvic tilt, because I'm pretty sure this is the longest video out there on solving anterior pelvic tilt. If you gain some value out of it, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. And if you're looking for a program that'll teach you the foundations of posture, how to stretch your body out, how to self-assess your own posture, how to eat right for your body type, and how to train correctly with proper form, you want to make sure you check out my 4-week transformation program at optimizeessentials.com. Seeing that you've made it this far already, it shows me that you're someone who values education. So you definitely want to check out my program, because I spent a lot of time on this 28-day transformation program. It's pretty much my 6+ years of knowledge condensed into one thing. So if you really study that, you'll be able to absorb all the information you'll need to know on posture, the essentials that you need to know on training and nutrition. So once again, you want to make sure you go check out my website. And yes, make sure you stay tuned for more videos, because I'm definitely going to pump out more content to help you expand your awareness on the human body and optimize your biomechanics, posture, and all that good stuff. So it's Kevin, and have a wonderful day. Peace. Woo! Oh yeah!